So I joined the Marine Corps. You know, the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. There you go. Yeah, we're the men's department. And you know, before I left home for good, my mother sat down with me and she wanted to give me some words of advice. And she said, Michael, just remember, you can't buy love. My mother said, Michael, just remember, you can't buy love. Isn't that sweet? But I found out she was wrong because I've deployed to Thailand and Korea. I found out love cost about 25 bucks. It's getting ugly over there. But I don't want to stereotype Asians. I think there's too much insensitivity in our society. I remember reading a story recently about one of the first Korean immigrants to settle in California by the name of Richard Wong. And he had a street named after him, Wong Way. And this upset a lot of people. They said, you know, made fun of the way Koreans speak English, making people say, you have to turn onto Wong Way, you have to go down Wong Way. And they didn't like that. They thought that was wrong. And this prompted Korean activists to petition to have other street names changed they felt that were equally insensitive to Koreans. There was Yummy Dog Drive, they want to change that, Yummy Dog Drive. Love You Long Time Lane is another one that they'd like to see changed. And finally, Tiny Penis Place. You know, Koreans aren't big on that name. So, you know, and I get it, you know, people are self-conscious. You know, I'm certainly no different. You know, I'm self-conscious about my hair, for instance. How does it look? I just got a cut. Good? All right. Thank you very much. I have this little Japanese lady that cuts my hair, and she normally does a very good job. And this last time when she was done, she spun me around in the chair so I could get a look in the mirror. And she says, "Is good?" Oh, that was an awful impersonation of a Japanese woman. That sounded more like a Russian hooker, didn't it? "Is good, comrade?" Oh. How is it that so many of you know what a Russian hooker sounds like? Huh? You've been on the internet. So she asked me if the haircut was good, and I'm looking at it and I said, you know, this side looks a little higher than that side. Can you even it out a little bit? And she says, I fix. So she takes the clippers and she starts cutting more on this side. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's the side that's too high. And she says, oh, is opposite in mirror. And I'm thinking, don't they teach you that day one in barber school? You know, that objects in the mirror are opposite as they appear? And scissors are sharp? Well, this barber wasn't too sharp. Now, fortunately, I only pay $5 for my haircuts on base. So when we got done, I handed her a $2 bill. She looked at it and said, this is only $2. I said, yeah, well, hold it up to the mirror. It'll look like a 5. So I was glad to see a lot of you lined up nice and early for the show tonight. I really do appreciate that. And I, too, am very big on punctuality. For instance, I'm the first person at church every Sunday morning. I'm also the first person at the strip club on Saturday night. I think people respect that kind of consistency. But I do go to church. I'm Catholic. How many Catholics in the audience? Let me see by a show of guilt. Okay. There you go. So I do go to church every Sunday, but sometimes I don't feel comfortable in church. The other day the priest was talking about sin, and he said, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Better to enter heaven with one eye than hell with two. And if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Better to enter heaven with one hand than hell with two. That's when I left. I don't know what was next, but things were going south in a hurry, and I was getting out of there. My wife went to a Catholic high school, and she's always saying I need to be more Christ-like, which is probably why she's always crucifying me. She got mad at me the other day. She said I was insensitive, and unfortunately her elderly mother, who had been sick for quite a while, recently passed away. And although her mother and I were not very close, I asked her if there's anything that I could do to help. And she said, yes, can you make sure this obituary gets run in the paper? And I said I would. Did you know it costs $100 a day to run an obituary in the paper? And since I was paying for it, I did something I thought was pretty clever at the time. For $20, I found out I could run an ad in the paper for a whole week in the home seller section. So I ran the following ad. Lovely 2-bedroom, 2-bath suburban Chicago home for sale due to the death of its homeowner, survived by her 4 children and 7 grandchildren. Well, my wife was not amused. To be honest with you, I'm just glad I didn't go with my first idea. For $8, I was going to run it in the classifieds under antiques. If I'd done that, I'd be looking in the classifieds under apartments for rent. So we had to fly back to Chicago for the funeral, and you know, flying is very expensive. I had to pay for parking, I had to pay for my luggage, I had to pay for snacks on the plane. Finally, when we got to cruising altitude, the flight attendant came around and was collecting a landing fee. And we flew US Airways. You're familiar with their new zone boarding process? US Airways, anyone? Yeah, I found it discriminatory. The woman came on and she said, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're now ready to load Zone 1. Zone 1 is reserved for our frequent flyers and our Platinum Preferred members. Welcome. She comes back on and says, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're now ready to load Zone 2. Zone 2 is reserved for our Silver and Gold Preferred members. Welcome. Then she comes back on and says, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're now ready to load Zone 3. Zone 3 is reserved for our passengers who book their flights on the internet. Welcome. So now there's like a dozen of us undesirables standing around looking at each other. She finally comes back on and says, all right, now we're going to load Zone 4. Zone 4 is reserved for passengers with DUIs, GEDs, HIV, and other STDs. And get on the plane. I didn't feel very welcome by that. But yeah, the main thing that, the main reason I don't like to fly is I get really freaked out on the plane when things don't go smoothly. Anybody with me on that? I get freaked out. We were on our approach into Chicago and we started hitting some really heavy turbulence. And I looked out the window and I saw lightning in the clouds and I was really getting nervous. And suddenly this voice behind me yells, oh no! And I'm like, oh no, don't start a panic on the plane. God, please. Another minute later I hear, oh no! And I'm like, oh no, my palms are sweating, I just want the pilot to land. Another minute later I hear, oh no! And I'm like, what the? I turn around and the couple behind me is playing Uno. Now I know there's a lot of flight restrictions already, but maybe we could ban Uno cards during lightning storms. At least on the flights I'm on. But you know, whenever I fly alone, I hope I'm going to get to sit next to a beautiful woman on the plane. And the last time I was on a flight, I sat next to a woman, and she was beautiful in God's eyes. She was a nun. And although she made me feel safe, I figured, you know, there wasn't going to be a lot for us to talk about. So I figured I'd catch up on reading. Anybody invest in Janus? I'm a Janus investor. Okay. So when the pilot turned off the fasten seatbelt sign, I got up and I wrestled my copy of Janus Monthly out of the overstuffed carry-on and proceeded to read. And while I was sitting there reading, I noticed that the nun looked at the magazine and then looked at me. Later on, she looked at the magazine and then looked at me. I thought maybe she was going to ask for some advice. And it wasn't until I put the magazine in the seat back pocket in front of me that I realized that when I pulled it from my carry-on, I must have ripped the J off the front cover. So for those of you who can spell, so for the past hour, this nun thought I was reading a copy of Anus Monthly. So, but I do like to travel. I like to go to different areas and see what they have to offer. I do spend a lot of time up in Long Beach at the Laugh Factory there. And if you've been up there in Long Beach, anybody been up to Long Beach recently? They've got, there you go. They have the very famous statue of the lone sailor that overlooks the Long Beach harbor. right? While I was up there last time, I saw another statue, a statue of a horse with a rider on it. And a little bit of trivia for you. If you see a statue of a horse with a rider on it, the horse has 2 legs in the air, it indicates that the rider was killed in battle. And if the horse has 1 leg in the air, it means that the rider died as a result of wounds sustained in battle. And if you see a horse with all 4 legs on the ground, it means the rider died of natural causes. Oh, and if you see a statue of a horse with a rider on it and the horse has all 4 legs in the air, you're probably on a merry-go-round, and those are a lot of fun, aren't they? Good fun, merry-go-round. All right. If you've been following the news lately, maybe you've heard about the refurbishing project up in Long Beach on the Queen Mary, a multi-million-dollar project that the city's come up drastically short on funding for. Fortunately, a group of gay men have come forward and volunteered their service to complete the interior decorating portion of the ballroom. These guys are really going out of the way. They're bending over forward to make ends meet. So if you've been following the news, you've heard a lot about the repealing of the don't ask, don't tell policy in the military, right? No opinions on that, huh? Okay. Whatever. Anyway, they're attempting to allow gays in the military by changing the policy to don't tell, don't touch. The new proposal is called the Homophilia Act. And apparently, I wonder how long it takes to get from here. I know radio stations have like an 8-second delay. Must be the alcohol buffer that's in it. So apparently they're going to let the gays enter the military. They just won't be able to enter anyone in the military. Okay, a little visual there. I actually got hit on by a guy after one of my shows up in Long Beach. It was kind of interesting. Do you want to hear about it?
Sure.
Yes.
This guy came up to me after the show, and he said, "I like you. You're really funny. You want to go grab a drink?" And I said, "Well, listen, thanks for the compliment, and I'm flattered, but I'm married." And he said, "Well, so am I, but he's at home." And I said, no, I'm married to a woman. I'm really not interested in men. And he said, no, it's cool. I won't tell anybody. It'll just be, me and you. And I said, no, look, let me make this very clear to you. I'm not a meat eater. I'm a vaginitarian. Okay. So, Long Beach is a very welcoming and accepting area. Recently, they celebrated their 27th annual Gay and Lesbian Pride Parade in downtown Long Beach. It was a terrific turnout. 80,000 people came out to support. It would have only been 70,000 if it weren't for the U.S. Navy. It's the largest event in Long Beach, second only to the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, in which Formula One race cars speed through the very same streets as the parade route. Now, there's no truth to the rumor that due to budget cuts, both events are going to be run simultaneously next year. But it would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Be sort of like the running of the bull dykes. But I love all women, I really do, which is problematic because I'm married. They say in marriage, you get a lot more sex before marriage than you do after. Yep. That's certainly true in my case. You know how some people sign a prenup? My wife signed a pre-nope. They also say in marriage you go through the 7-year itch. Are you familiar with this? Yeah, been there, scratch that? There you go. Well, I've been married 16 years and I'm suffering from sexual psoriasis. It's not a real thing. What has he got?